We're going to begin with the number 10 best match of 2024. And we kick off here with Bryan Danielson, who I was just talking about, against Zack Sabre Jr. This was from the New Japan New Beginning in Osaka show on February 11th. And they put on a clinic, if you remember, at Wrestle Kingdom. Well, not Wrestle Kingdom, Wrestle Dream last year. But for all the talk between these two guys about submissions and I'm going to tap you out, Bryan knocked him out, I think with the knee strike, and he pinned him. And Sabre didn't like that. So we got round 2 on his home turf. And this time it was more than 30 minutes. Sabre pinned Bryan Danielson. And I thought this was even better than their Wrestle Dream match. But they both had said that they wanted to prove who the best is by submission. And they didn't do that. So that is still unresolved. Now, we may never get to see it again. It depends on Bryan's health. But I do hope that we get the chance because these two go together like peanut butter and jelly. I mean, you talk about two of the best technicians in the wrestling business. Bryan Danielson and Zack Sabre Jr., if you made a list of the best ring tacticians in the last 20 years, Danielson and Sabre are going to be right at the top of that list. So to put the two of them together in the ring after so many years apart, because they wrestled many, many years ago, I think 2008. But after so long, to get these two back in the ring together last year and then again this year, it was exactly what you would have expected. And it was just a fantastic professional wrestling match. And hopefully we will get part 3 at some point. Like I said, I don't know if it'll ever happen, but it was great. It was great stuff. Number 9. And this is one of the reasons why I'm glad I waited until now to do this list. Because at number 9, it is Kazuchika Okada against Will Ospreay in the finals of the Continental Classic. This is from World's End only a few days ago on December 28th. And this is one of the reasons why I'm happy I held off on this list, because I figure when I saw who was in the semis and the final, potentially finals of the Continental Classic, I said there's a pretty damn good chance at least one of those matches is going to end up and I'm going to have to rework my list. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. You have Ospreay coming out all woozy from the blood loss against Kyle Fletcher earlier in the show. And they had just a great fucking match between two of the best in the world, with Ospreay having to fight from behind, and Okada finally gives us our first real New Japan style Okada match since coming to the United States. And it didn't feel like it overstayed its welcome either. I mean, the match was right around 20 minutes, maybe just shy of 20 minutes. So it wasn't overly long, but didn't feel too short either. It was great. It was great. And it was the best match on that show last weekend. So that makes the cut at number 9 on my list. Yes, a late entry. We have early entries. We have late entries. It's all part of the same year. It all counts. Number 8 on this list. Speaking of great matches. MJF against Will Ospreay on the 250th episode of AEW Dynamite back on July 17th. These two went out there and they had a nearly 60-minute classic for the International Championship. These guys went at it. Now, you had the commercial breaks, and anytime you do like an Iron Man match, which that's not what this was, but basically, if you do like, we've seen Iron Man matches on TV, and they get interrupted by commercial breaks, and it sucks, but that's the nature of TV. But it didn't, for me anyway, it didn't ruin the match. They had the crowd in the palm of their hand. I think they were in Little Rock, Arkansas that night, and I didn't know what to expect as far as the audience went, but these people were hanging on to their every move. And then you have, right there at the very end of the match, MJF spits in his face. And it pissed off Will Ospreay. And he yelled for the Tiger Driver 91. There were 60 seconds left in this match. And he couldn't bring himself to do it. This was the move that he nearly crippled Bryan Danielson with. And he had not done it since. And he almost did, but he couldn't do it. And we got a ref bump. And MJF ended up decking Ospreay with the Dynamite Diamond Ring. And he covered him, and the referee came over, and at 59 minutes and 58 seconds, he pins Will Ospreay. And he wins the international title. Just when I thought they were going the full 60, because they didn't want to beat either one of these guys, MJF steals it with 2 seconds left in the match. And they told the story with Ospreay, proving Swerve Strickland right. Swerve is the one who told him back in June, like, you don't have the killer instinct. You can't win. You can't beat me. You can't go for the kill shot. He proved him right here, and it cost him the championship. And it was great, too, because when it was over, you figure, well, surely we're going to get a rematch, probably at Wembley, and when we do, he'll finally hit the Tiger Driver, right, you would hope, and the crowd will explode, and it'll set up for this great moment. But as far as this match is concerned, one of the best TV matches that you could possibly ask for. These two went out there, and I thought they killed it. And number 7 in the countdown, this was one hell of a match right here. This was Swerve Strickland against Will Ospreay at Forbidden Door on June 30th. This match was not even supposed to happen, at least not on this show. There were reports that Ospreay at the time, he had lobbied personally for this match. He wanted to take the loss as a way to shut people up, basically, who didn't think that Swerve was either main event material or that he was only going to be a transitional champion just to get the belt onto Ospreay at Wembley. He wanted to shut that shit down. And so, because I was shocked as all hell when they announced that this match was happening at Forbidden Door, right? I thought that could have easily been a Wembley main event. But they went out there and they had a fucking great match. Just this week, in fact, Fightful reported that one of the talked about ideas was to have Swerve defending the championship on that show, not against Ospreay, but against Yota Tsuji. And I don't know if that was locked in necessarily, but apparently it was something that was discussed. And that obviously ended up not happening. And Yota Tsuji, I think, wrestled on the pre-show that night. He's one of those New Japan names that is on the rise, and I think you're going to see him do big things in 2025. So we ended up with this match, and it was easily the best main event in the brief history of these Forbidden Door shows. We've had 3 of them now? Easily the best main event out of all of them. And in the build-up, Swerve said that Ospreay did not have the killer instincts, what I just talked about with the MJF match. You don't have the killer instinct to get the job done and be a champion. And Will proved him right. He had the chance to go for the Tiger Driver at one point in this match. He opted not to. He went for the Stormbreaker instead. And when the referee was out, Don Callis handed him the screwdriver, and he refused to use it. So he had many opportunities to put him away, and he didn't take it, and in the end, it cost him. And Swerve retained the title. But these two had a hell of a match. Hopefully, at some point, they can run it back. You don't have to go right into the rematch for everything, but we need to get a round 2 at some point. Maybe this year coming up between those two. Number 6. Now we're getting deeper into the countdown here. Number 6 takes us to London. It takes us to Wembley Stadium. 53,000 people for All In this year. And it's the rematch between MJF and Will Ospreay. First of all, I love the Assassin's Creed entrance for Ospreay. They incorporated the whole video game promotion into it, but I thought it was a pretty cool entrance. They had an outstanding match. I don't think this match could have been booked any better than it was. You had the return of Daniel Garcia showing up to stop MJF from using what was supposed to be the diamond ring. I think he legitimately lost it. And they incorporated that into the storyline that it was stolen and pawned and whatever. I think he lost the fucking ring, but whatever the foreign object was he was trying to use, Garcia stopped him, right, to get revenge on MJF for what he had done to him. And we got the payoff to the Tiger Driver story. This is a story that was playing out since Dynasty, and he refused to use the move under any circumstances. And it was Bryan Danielson, ultimately, who gave him permission to use the move. He told him, do it. Before the show, do it. Go ahead, use the move. And he did. And he won with it. Thank God. I was so worried. He hit the move. I'm like, don't fucking kick out. We see this so many times in wrestling, so many times in AEW, the fucking kickouts. Please don't kick out of this. But he didn't. He hit the Tiger Driver. And we got the dramatic slow count by the referee as he crawled back over. And Will Ospreay regains the International Championship. It was the only appropriate way for this match to end. He wouldn't accept the American title because MJF had transformed it into the American Championship. Didn't want to have anything to do with it. And then Christopher Daniels gets in and hands him the international title and this big celebration. He didn't win the world title this year, but this was a big Wembley moment for Ospreay, and the crowd went crazy for it. It was just great. It was great stuff. And I enjoyed this more than I did their 59-minute and 58-second match. Two great matches, two very different matches, but this one right here, with the payoff and everything and the setting and the circumstances, I have to rank this higher than the other one. Number 5 on this top 10 list takes us back to Revolution on March 3rd. It was Sting and Darby Allin, the defending AEW World Tag Team Champions, defending against the Young Bucks, hand-selected by Sting to be his opponents in his final match. There's a lot of things that you can say about Tony Khan, his booking, the way he does business, the way that he answers questions or doesn't. There's a lot of things you can say about Tony Khan, good and bad. One of the positive things about Tony Khan and the way that he does business when it comes to the legends that he signs and he brings into the company, and Sting is the number one example of this, is the reverence that he treats many of them with and the respect that he shows many of them. And Sting is a great example of this. When Sting came into the company, Sting was not supposed to wrestle like regular matches in front of live crowds. We didn't even have live crowds. Sting came in, it was during the pandemic, they were running Daly's Place. Maybe he was going to do cinematic matches and maybe 3 of them, and that would be it, right? That was what the word on the street was at that time. And it didn't take very long for that to evolve into just doing full-blown matches in the ring. But he protected Sting as far as his character and not jobbing him out. He didn't really protect Sting from himself when it came to him doing dives off balconies and stuff like that, because we know Tony doesn't say no to anything, apparently. But he protected Sting and that character, and he just would not beat him. He would not have him lose. He would not make him look weak. If Sting looked weak in a match, he would make a comeback. Everybody would go nuts for it. He would no-sell stuff. They'd put him through a fucking table. I remember FTR put him through a table in a match once. He got right back up. People went nuts for it. Sting's run in WWE ended in the worst possible way. He got hurt, and it looked to be career-ending. And that was going to be it. One of the greatest careers over because of an injury. And he never was going to have that proper send-off. And obviously losing in his one and only WrestleMania match is still a head-scratching decision. Whether or not they thought it was going to be his last match or Sting wanted to lose, he shouldn't have lost that match. But that's neither here nor there. But it ended on an injury. And that was a shitty way for it to end. And it looked like that was it. But then Tony Khan gave him the chance to come in and to write the chapter to close his career out that he wanted to write. And thankfully, he was able, he got banged up a few times, but he was able to largely stay healthy and was protected in that way. And he ended up closing his career out as a champion, undefeated. Not a single loss. And I know some people are going to look at that and go, well, the flip side to that is you have 60-something-year-old Sting who won't do a job. Believe me, I don't think Sting would have had an issue doing a job. Lord knows he did plenty of them in TNA and even in WWE in his WrestleMania match. I cannot imagine Sting going to Tony Khan and saying, I'm not going to lose. This was Tony Khan. And it was Tony Khan's call for Sting to win a championship and go in as champion and retire as champion. You think Sting wanted to do that? Sting's old school. Sting, if it were up to him, he would have lost his match, just like Bryan Danielson. But Tony Khan said no. And so they go to Greensboro, the same building where Sting wrestled Ric Flair in the match that put him on the map at the Greensboro Coliseum in 1988. They had that 45-minute match. He walks in here, and actually, even before he walked out in the building that night, they had that final Showtime promo, that video with Sting showing all the highlights. They could only show so much because they didn't have access to all the WWE and the WCW footage. But this great video to the piano music, he's sitting alone in an empty theater. And then they come back to him, And he's sitting there all alone in the empty theater, and he tells us it's showtime for the last time. Then we get to the match. Sting's sons come out. You see them there in the image. I don't know that Sting ever actually wore that red Wolfpack gear. I have no memory of him ever wearing that before. So I don't think he ever wore that particular color attire. But you had one of his sons dressed up as Wolfpack Sting. You had the other son. And by the way, the one dressed up as Wolfpack Sting is actually in training right now. He's training with Darby Allin to become a pro wrestler. You have his other son there dressed up as Flat Top Surfer Sting. Then Sting comes out to Metallica's Seek and Destroy, his old music from WCW. You got Jim Ross and Tony Schiavone on commentary, who I believe may have been doing commentary for the match with Flair in '88. Flair was there. He comes out. Ricky the Dragon Steamboat is there as the guest timekeeper. You got Nikita Koloff and Magnum TA sitting in the front row. Like, they did all they could do to make this moment as special as they possibly could. Then you had Darby Allin doing one of the dumbest things that I've ever seen done in a match. But of course, the dumb Darby spot is basically a signature of every single match that he's in. But that dive off the ladder through that pane of glass is truly one of the stupidest things I've ever seen. It's memorable, but it's stupid. But that took him out of the match for a while. Sting was on his own. Eventually, Darby came back, and in the end, Sting wins with a Scorpion Deathlock on Matt Jackson. Sting gets to go out on top. You will not see a better send-off or final match for a wrestler than what Tony Khan gave to Sting that night at the Greensboro Coliseum. And Sting himself has commented and said that it's the greatest night and the greatest moment of his career. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that he was able to go out there with his sons. And his sons got to be a part of that. So that is one of the cool things about the way in which Tony Khan treats many of the veterans and the legends that he has under contract and that he brings into the company for moments like this. And it made for an incredible night and one of the more fun attractions in wrestling the entire year. I could come up with a list of 20 matches that were technically in ring better than this one, but it's not about that. That it can't be the only thing that you judge and grade these matches by. It's got to have a certain feel to it. It's got to have a story. It's got to evoke some kind of emotion. And if you followed this man's career, if you were a Sting fan, if you knew him from the WCW days, he was the franchise player there for so many years. And to see him go out on that note like that, the only thing I would change about it, honestly, is he took the mic when the match was over to cut a farewell speech. And they cut him off because they had a cutoff, like a hard cutoff for the pay-per-view. And he didn't get to say much. And in the middle of him speaking, they went off the air. Now, I think they put the whole thing on YouTube after, but it's like, what the fuck? You cut Sting off in his farewell speech. That's the only thing I would have changed about it. But this was tremendous stuff. Absolutely tremendous stuff. Now we get to number 4. Top 10 countdown here of the best matches of 2024. This match right here is what happens when you have a personal issue between two men that is built up over an extended period of time, and you give it the proper build, you give it the proper platform, it has the right stipulation, everything just comes together, the stars align, and what you end up with is not only one of the best matches all year, but with this stipulation, one of the best matches that you will ever see in WWE inside the Hell in a Cell. And it was CM Punk and Drew McIntyre at Bad Blood back in October. This was 27 years to the day. October 5th, 1997 was Bad Blood in your house. And we had the very first Hell in a Cell match between Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker. CM Punk and Drew McIntyre had one singular mission here. And Punk articulated it. He was on some kind of podcast or show, I think the week before. And he said, I want to bring the cell back to what it's supposed to be. I don't want to have a cell that needs a match. I want to have a match that needs the cell. And these two went out there and they had a classic. Each man promised to make the other bleed in their promos on TV, and they delivered on that. Punk bled, McIntyre bled. McIntyre ended up needing 16 staples in his head from that shot with the toolbox. Punk wrapped a chain around his knee. He shoved a handful of beads from that bracelet, that fucking bracelet, into McIntyre's mouth. And he hit a chain-assisted GTS to win the match and finally put an exclamation point on this feud once and for all. That is how you blow off a year-long feud. This right here is what Hell in a Cell was created for 27 years ago. You take two men who hate each other with a passion, you lock them inside of a cage, and you let them go out there and destroy one another. And blood, when it's used in the right circumstances, blood can be so impactful. When was the last time we saw like double juice in a WWE match, let alone Hell in a Cell? When you have a Hell in a Cell match, you should have blood. We got plenty of that. But like, this was perfect. What they put together here was perfect. They never even had to leave the cell. They didn't have to climb to the top. They didn't have to tease some big high spot or a dive. It was all contained inside the cage, which is what the cage was originally intended for. And this right here was the match where when it was over and he came out of it healthy and not hurt, I said, okay, CM Punk now he's back, right? He came back at SummerSlam, but like now he's back. And hopefully as we head into this new year, obviously he's factored into some big plans going into WrestleMania. He may well be wrestling Roman Reigns at WrestleMania. So hopefully he'll be able to stay healthy this time. But that match is the one that just, you kind of sit back and go, okay, if he can stay healthy, this is money right here. There's so many different people now that he can work with. Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns and Kevin Owens and on and on and on. But this right here, easily one of the greatest matches of 2024. A lot of people are going to have this match, if not at the top of their list, higher up on the list. I struggled with this. I almost had it higher on the list, but I just couldn't rank it any higher above the other matches that I had here. Number 3 on the top 10 list for 2024 takes us all the way back to the month of April. April was a very big month in the world of wrestling. There was a lot going on back in the month of April. But this match right here is one of the damnedest matches that I have ever seen. And it takes us back to AEW Dynasty. On April 21st, it was Bryan Danielson against Will Ospreay. And it was billed as a first-time ever dream match. When this match was over, that night, I called it the greatest match in AEW history. Danielson was already one of the all-time greats coming into this. Ospreay is well on his way. You knew that this was going to be something special, but you never know how two people are going to mesh, right? I mean, that first Danielson-Okada match I mentioned from Forbidden Door, it was good, but it wasn't nearly as good as their rematch at the Tokyo Dome. So you just never know for sure what you're going to get. But this match, you take two of the best wrestlers in the world, you drop them in the ring, you let them do their thing. The intensity that they brought, the crowd, my God, the crowd played their part perfectly. The crowd they're the third man in these matches. And sometimes they cooperate and sometimes they don't. Sometimes they really love what they're watching and sometimes they sit on their hands. But the crowd, man, they were behind these guys. They were so into this. They made this match even more fun than it was. You think back to the end. Both men go to opposite corners. Danielson, he starts throwing his fingers up into the air for the S chants. The camera work here deserves praise as well. The camera zooms in on Ospreay, slowly pulls off the elbow pad. They're taking their time. They're letting it build. They're letting it breathe. They explode out of each of their corners. Ospreay connects first with the forearm shot, which is what you see here. And then follows that up with the Tiger Driver. And at that point, we see Bryan Danielson convulsing on the mat. Bryce Remsburg is motioning for the doctor to come check on Danielson. And Ospreay didn't realize it. He fired a hidden blade off, and then he pinned him. And so after 30 minutes, these two went out there and had a mat classic. But at that time, we didn't know that this whole Tiger Driver thing was going to lead to what it did at Wembley with Ospreay and MJF. I don't know even if Tony Khan and Will Ospreay knew exactly how they were going to pay that story off in April. You know, that it was going to pay off the way it did in that match in August. But that was the beginning of that story. This match was everything that you could have hoped for. If you're a fan of either or both of these men, this match was just a masterpiece. It was a masterpiece. Exactly what you would have hoped that it would be. I love this match. Absolutely fantastic. We get to number 2 on this list. The second best match of 2024. And this match takes us back to August. It takes us all the way back to Wembley Stadium. It takes us to All In, and it takes us to Bryan Danielson against Swerve Strickland at All In London for the AEW World Championship. If I thought that that last match I just got done talking about was the greatest in AEW history, somehow Bryan Danielson found a way to top it 4 months later. And it's arguable because, honestly, I could go either way with it, but emotion wins the day. Emotion is the key word here. Emotion wins the day. Tony Khan wanted Bryan Danielson to get his flowers, and he wanted him to have a place in the lineage of his world championship. He wanted him to at least hold that title once. And he had Bryan win the Owen Hart tournament. He won the opportunity to challenge for the championship at Wembley. And it was 10 years ago, 2014. Bryan Danielson celebrated a world championship win in front of 65,000 people. Confetti raining down upon him. And I was in the building that night, so I can vouch for what a special moment that was. Here on this show, he celebrated another world championship victory in front of another large crowd. Confetti raining down upon him. This time, though, he had his wife and his 2 kids in the ring to share the moment with him. This was a 5-star match. I don't care how you define it. I don't care if you're Dave Meltzer. I don't care who you are. Everyone has their definition of what a 5-star match looks like. Right? I call Hogan Rock at WrestleMania 18 a 5-star match. I think Meltzer gave it 3 stars. Okay? Good for him. I don't give a fuck. That's another 5-star match. This is a 5-star match. One of the greatest AEW matches of all time. And honestly, based on pure emotion alone, it probably is the greatest AEW match of all time. Bryan himself has called it the greatest moment of his career because his family was there to be a part of it. And as someone who was there for his WrestleMania win 10 years ago, I wish I could have been there at Wembley for this one, just to be kind of in the crowd in that moment, knowing what it was like 10 years earlier. It would have been very special. And I'm kind of jealous, frankly, of the people who did make the trip, or maybe you're from the UK, wherever you're from. But if you were at that show in that building this year, that's just one of those special moments that I'm sure is a lot of fun to be part of. We have come to the end of our list. It is time to reveal the number 1 match of 2024. My number 1 match of the year in pro wrestling. And it takes us all the way back to April. It takes us back to night 2 of WrestleMania. It takes us back to Roman Reigns and Cody Rhodes for the WWE Undisputed Championship, Bloodline Rules. This is a match. Look, I mentioned emotion before, okay? Emotion is something that really, if you look at my entire top 5, look at all the matches I just mentioned in my top 5, okay? Including Sting's retirement match, Danielson at Wembley Stadium, and this match here, even Ospreay and Danielson, right? Emotion. That's what it's all about. Nowhere more so, though, than here in this match. You go back to WrestleMania 39 last year, there were a lot of very upset people with the finish of that match. I was one of those people. And Cody is sitting there in the middle of the ring, and he just looks depressed, right? A lot of people were depressed, knowing that we were in for at least another year of Roman Reigns as the champion. But Cody came back to the company in 2022, and he told us what his goal was. His goal was to win the championship that his father had taken away from him when he thought he won the title many years earlier. So they established right out of the gate what the story was going to be for Cody Rhodes. And then he got hurt. So he missed whatever it was, 6-7 months, came back, won the Royal Rumble, went to WrestleMania, and lost. He needs more adversity. So we fast forward 1 year later, and we come to this match here. It is the rematch. And everything was set up. I mean, you could see it coming from a mile away. You knew that this had to be it. This had to be it. I mean, if he goes in there and loses again, that's it. He's cooked. That's it. It's over. So the stage was set. Bloodline rules. You knew going into this match it was going to be a giant clusterfuck. You knew that people were going to be interfering. You knew there was going to be a lot of bullshit going on. And that's okay. If it works, if you can make it work, and it fits the story, and you make it fun, then it's fine. One of my favorite matches, Steve Austin and Dude Love, Over the Edge 98. It's a great match. But there was a lot of overbooking in that match, right? I mean, the numbers were stacked against Austin that night. You had Patterson and Briscoe. The guest referee was Vince McMahon. The guest timekeeper. The guest this. The guest that. Oh my God, how's he going to overcome all these odds? This was already a great match before the Avengers Endgame portion, which is basically what this turned into. This was WWE's version of Avengers Endgame. Jimmy Uso was the first one to interfere. Jey Uso comes out, spears his brother off the ramp. That one spot was better than their entire match at WrestleMania. So now Jimmy and Jey are out of the picture. Cody's going for a third crossroads. Solo Sikoa gets in the ring, hits Cody with a Samoan spike. The callback to WrestleMania 39, right? You're like, oh shit, not again. Cody kicks out. John Cena comes out. Now everybody's losing their minds. John Cena has a bone to pick with Solo Sikoa. He goes after Solo. He takes out Roman. Here comes The Rock. And you had to know when The Rock pinned Cody the night before, they weren't going to beat Cody 2 nights in a row. But here comes The Rock, and we get a Rock and Cena face-to-face confrontation in the ring. Rock takes out Cena. Then we hear the Shield music. What the fuck? What's going on here? Seth Rollins gets into the ring. He's in his Shield gear. Immediately gets dropped, which made me laugh. Maybe that wasn't supposed to be the reaction. But he gets dropped. Poor Seth. But Seth did say coming into WrestleMania, he told Cody, look, I don't like you, but we got to take down Roman. I'll be your Shield. And he was. And then The Undertaker shows up. And that's fine. But man, if I had one change, if there was one thing that stopped this from being absolutely perfect, it should have been Stone Cold Steve Austin in that spot. And apparently WWE wanted him and he said no. Whatever the reason was, he couldn't do it or he didn't want to do it. He didn't want to fly into Philadelphia, whatever it was. That's the only change I would have made. Because imagine the glass shattering. People went nuts when The Undertaker's music hit. And they heard that, the gong, but imagine if the glass shattered. And we got Austin and Rock, and one last time Rock has to sell the stunner and flops like a fish and bounces up, and everybody's losing their minds. And you got Austin as he's leaving the ring looking down at Cody, get the fuck up, get up, come on, it's your time, get the fuck up. Like, that's the only change I would have made to any of this. But the people still reacted to The Undertaker like it was a big deal. He gives Rock a chokeslam. He takes Rock out of the equation. We all know what happened from there. Cody ends up hitting 3 crossroads. And he pins Roman Reigns. And you want to talk about emotion. Go back and listen to Samantha Irvin when she announced Cody Rhodes as the winner of this match. Go back and listen to Michael Cole and Corey Graves on commentary as they're speaking. I mean, you could hear it in their voice. They had like a lump in their throat. It was emotional. And Michael Cole is close to Cody Rhodes anyway, because the two of them are good friends. It was an emotional moment. It might have been predictable, but it was perfect. The story played out perfectly. The family was there. And Brandy was there, and everybody else comes out. Cena's already out there, but you got Randy Orton and Kevin Owens and LA Knight. Like, everyone's coming out to the ring to celebrate with Cody. Triple H, he calls him out to the ring. Bruce, we'll forget about that. But it's just this great moment. And it was a great payoff. And after 1,300 some odd days, whatever it was, finally, Cody Rhodes is champion and he finishes his story. How could it be anything else? When that match was over, the word that came to me was fun. I haven't had fun like that watching a wrestling match in forever. That's how I judge it on this list. There's so many matches on this list that are technically just outstanding. How do you separate one from the other and say that this is number one and this is number two and this is number three? It comes down to emotion. The top 5 matches all had that. This match right here is my number 1 match of the year.